I'm ready to begin stitching the large motif stitch, the Milanese Pinwheel. For the Milanese Pinwheel, I'm going to use two different colors of neon rays, N64 and N79. And I'm going to begin with the N64. I'm going to begin with about 64 inches. Now this is a really long length, and I will probably adjust it. But even though it's a really long length, it's not enough to do the entire thing. So I'll have to rethread, and that's fine. Now, before I begin stitching, I'm going to iron my neon rays with my mini flat iron. This removes the folds from the card and makes it much easier to stitch with. Now, I prefer ironing to dampening, which is another option. In my experience, when I have dampened neon rays or rayon threads, they lose a little bit of the shine. If you want to dampen your neon rays, dampen all of the neon rays that you're using in the project so that they will all look the same. Okay, so I've ironed my neon rays, and now I'm ready to begin stitching. And I'm going to anchor with a pin stitch in the shape of a T. This is going to provide a very flat anchor, and one that I think will be the best. It won't make a lump under the stitches of the pinwheel, and it'll hold securely. So I'm going to find the center of my top edge. It's 9 Smyrna crosses. Okay, so here's the center. And I'm going to come one off from the center. It may seem counterintuitive to begin with not the longest stitch that's going this way, but the one beside it. But there's a reason for it. And I'm going to count down 7 canvas threads. So here's where I'm going to begin with my first stitches from a Milanese pinwheel. So I'm going to enlarge this just a little bit. And I'm going to put my anchor right about here. I always make my pin stitches from the front of the canvas so I can see what I'm doing. It's okay in the pin stitch if you pierce the ribbon. It'll just help it to hold a little bit better. If you're concerned that the T-stitch won't hold, you can make the first stitch again so that you actually have 4 stitches in your pin stitch. That should hold it very securely. Okay, so now I'm ready to begin stitching. I'm going to snip off the tail so it won't get in the way. And the first stitch is going to come up. We'll check the count again. Here's the middle. We're 1 to the right of the middle and down 7 canvas threads. Okay, right there. I'm sorry, it needs to be 8 canvas threads, so 8 canvas threads. Seven canvas threads, that was right the first time. Oh, now I got moved over one, so right there. 7 canvas threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Always check and check and check, because I'd rather not have to take the ribbon out. The first stitch is going to cover 24 canvas threads, and this is the most stitching that you'll have to do. I'm going to want to use a laying tool. I want my ribbon to be extremely flat. Now I'm going to check to make sure that I've counted correctly. And the way that I'm going to do that is I know that the center of the Milanese pinwheel is going to be right here. Okay, that's the center of the Milanese pinwheel, and our first stitch is just to the right of that. And the center of the Milanese pinwheel should be lining up with the center edge of the Myrna crosses, the top edge, and the center of the side edge, and it does. Yep. Okay, so I'm in the right spot, so I'm going to take this out. It was just marking my spot so I could make sure I had the count correct. I'm going to hold the ribbon against the canvas, and then I'm going to follow it in with my trolley needle. You can use a laying tool or a trolley needle, whichever you prefer. And you'll see how the stitch looks loose until we make the next stitch, and then that will tighten it up. Hold the ribbon flat. The first part of our Milanese pinwheel, the stitches are getting shorter, and the end points will be in a diagonal line. But you'll see that I'm not having to count this because I know I'm just coming up one canvas thread diagonally away from the previous stitch. And I'm going to make these straight stitches in decreasing lengths until I have a stitch that's over just 2 canvas threads. That will be the last stitch of the straight stitches. And you can also, if you want to, just put your finger on it to hold it in place while you're bringing the needle up for the next stitch, just to make sure that it doesn't wiggle around or stray away from you. Make sure that your ribbon is as flat as you can make it. If it gets too twisted, a lot of times I will unthread it, straighten it out, and then rethread. Another thing that some people do with their neon rays is to lay the stitches on the front and the back of the canvas. I usually don't do that. I just make sure that it's straight on the front. But if you like to lay it on the front and the back, by all means you can do that. Okay, now the length that I started with looks like it's going to be enough to stitch the next straight stitch section. So I'll show you how to handle that. It won't be enough to stitch all of them. Okay, so this is the first section of straight stitches, and the next section of straight stitches is going to be this way. But in order to get there, I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is where the needle's going to come up. So the thread carry is going to be out here. I don't think this is going to be covered by the diagonal stitches that I'm going to make next, so I'm going to make an intermediate pin stitch. An intermediate pin stitch is a single stitch over one canvas thread, and it's just to minimize the potentiality of a thread carry showing through. Now I'm going to bring the needle up where I'm going to need it next, right there. And I'm going to park it on top of the canvas where it's out of the way and won't get caught up as I'm doing the next stitch.